Baby, don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know for sure. But does she really wanna, but can't stand to see me walk out the door? Can't stand to fight the feeling, cause the thought alone is killing me right now. Thank God for Mom and Dad for sticking two together, cause we don't know how. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. You think you got it, oh, you think you got it, but got it, just don't get it till there's nothing at all. We get together, oh, we get together, but separate's always better when there's feelings involved. If what they say there's nothing is forever, then what makes love the exception? So why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, are we so in denial when we know we're not happy here? Hey, yeah. 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 All right now, fellas. Oh, what's cooler than being cool? I can't hear you, oh no. I say what's cooler than being cool? And all right, 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 now ladies, we're gonna break it down in just a few seconds here. Don't make me break it down for nothing. I wanna see you all on your all's fattest behavior. I say lend me some sugar, I am your neighbor. Let's say shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake, shake, shake it like a Polaroid. Shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake it, shake it, shake, shake, shake it like a Polaroid picture. Now we'll shake it. I say shake it, shake, shake, shake it, shake it. Oh no, and shake it up and shake it up and hey yeah. Hey yeah. Oh, hey yeah. Hey yeah. Oh, hey yeah. Hey yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to our pre-recorded live show here at Kindred UMC. I'm Chris Haden. I'm the pastor.
Hey, I'm Courtney Young. I'm the Director of Community Engagement.
I'm Preston, and football has started. Go Jags. Duval.
Duo?
Duval.
Duval.
Duval County.
I was an indoor kid.
I'm going to say
growing
go Cowboys. That's my team.
No.
up. I was born in
the
Dallas.
D.
I had a great run with the Cowboys when they were doing the Super Bowl thing, and like that was my team. It was
They
awesome.
might be doing the Super Bowl thing soon.
Yeah.
They're real good.
They're real good.
Hey, awesome! I'll get on that
I
bandwagon.
also like KC.
We'll get you around the around the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm a
Chris,
fair.
they're doing
I am
real well.
I'm definitely a fair weather. I couldn't care less.
KC's my other team.
Jump
Also-
on. Come on,
No,
the band.
screw-
Come on. You love the band.
Ew. I had players on my fantasy football team last year and now this year that are on KC. I'm allowed to root for more than one team.
And this will be released a week later, so maybe everything will be totally like.
And I will still root for them, just like I will still root for Dallas.
Also in the studio, we have my lovely wife Francisca, who's working on her D&D character behind the camera, and the good boy Jonah, who's on the couch. So, before we get into this week's topic, anything still lingering from last week that you wanted to talk about or ask or
What was last week?
bring up? Last week was Abram's call, later known as Abraham.
So, right. We're still on Abram, though.
We're still, we're doing Abram and the birth of Ishmael today.
Okay. As always, I had something, and I, one, forgot it, and two, think it wasn't really necessary if I did forget it. It was along the lines of following a calling versus hearing a calling. And it was more on the, again, towards the business side of things of, are you willing to be stuck at this job for 10 years because you think it's going to progress you in the future, or because you like sitting and don't like to change
Which could
things?
be a call.
Which could
I
also
like sitting.
be a call.
And my calling is to sit. I always say that I became a pastor because I always wanted to get paid to say dope shit. And I was not like funny enough to be a stand-up. And so like I became a pastor because I really like thinking up cool things to say. And there's something about like that small preference that led me down this like major road. That was kind of if I could sum up last week, that was the point that I hoped someone got out there, which is like small steps in like a cooperative direction can lead to huge, big, significant life things.
Cooperative sometimes feeling bad, which is
Yeah.
the weirdest.
Sometimes cooperative is like you have to get up and do it, you know? Like,
Well, I mean, not even that. Not like a pushing against or a resistive, but more of a, I know I should, even though I might not want to. Or and that's kind of resistive feeling too, but more of the, when are you going to type of.
Yeah, oh
like
yeah.
That toilet has
That's
to
like
be clean.
that's like a classic character in TV and books and stuff. Like the guy who just never left the nest, who
Yeah.
never left the safety ground of like the status quo, you know? And like a lot of good stories start with an old man who never leaves, and finally because of, I don't know, a bunch of balloons, he leaves, you know, and goes on an adventure, you know?
It's almost like it's almost an irony. It's so sarcastic sounding. Like this guy got through it so long that he didn't even know he was supposed to go, and kind of just, maybe he went senile and went.
Well, yeah, there's something about Abram. Now, there's a tricky thing here because, like, one of the things that we talk about a lot, that Genesis talks about a lot with Abram and Sarah, who we're going to talk about tonight, and this leads into where we're going tonight too, is how old they are. Mm-hmm. They're like in their 80s, you know? Now, that's actually a common like practice for storytellers. Like ancient Egypt, pharaohs were reported to live 900 years before they died and that kind of thing. And in historical fiction, that was a way that they would honor someone important. Mm-hmm. And they say it later about Moses, and
but then you see,
lived to 800 and something years.
And in the Egyptian world, we've got pretty solid record, and you go, hey, that's not 400
Yeah,
years.
that's probably not. Like
Maybe
that
that's a phrase that we didn't know about.
Well, yeah. So it's like it's almost like an accepted lie. Like we all know you're lying. It's a way of saying how important this guy was, mm-hmm. you know. So all right, but it also in this particular story plays a big part because part of the story is about the birth in such an impossible circumstance, which is a theme that goes throughout Scripture. Like a birth out of impossibility. Later we see it with the Virgin Mary. We see it in lots of other characters that are in the Old Testament, like impossible births. Zachariah and Elizabeth are also part of the Christmas story, you know, or the Advent story, I guess. So anyway, we're going to talk about the birth of Ishmael, which is ultimately going to be the son of Abram, but not the son of Sarah, his wife, or Sarai still. So we're going to look at Genesis chapter 16, and it's basically the whole chapter. So just stick with me. I'm going to gonna kind of get us through it so that we can then talk about it. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. Before we start, a couple things to lift up so that we have some context. So I'll put it to you. Do you remember what the covenant and blessing to Abram was? Do you remember what God kind of asked and what promised?
Go and multiply the earth.
No,
No.
that was
the Noah promise.
Right,
That was the
yeah.
promise, the testament.
Well,
that was Adam and Eve and
It's the
Noah.
next one.
And yeah,
Okay.
this is a new one.
Into the unknown. That's what it is.
oh,
Go there.
and I'll show you.
There we
Take
go.
your stuff, go over there to a
Sorry,
place that
brain
I'll show
fart.
you. And then the other half of it is, if you do that, then I will make of you a great nation. I will make because this covenant with Abram and God gets repeated over and over again. And the essence of is, if you go where I show you, if you will be my guy, then I will make of you a great nation that will bless all the earth. And inherent in that language is, you're going to have sons and daughters and children, and you're going to be the father of descendants, despite your old age, And so part of the promise of God in this covenant is that Abram and his wife are going to bear children, even though they're really, really old. So, which is, again, very important in Hebrew culture. The idea that you would bear descendants and pass along is something that's really, really important in Hebrew culture. So,
More context before I let you get to it, real quick. Is this on the way, or is this still at point A?
they're in Canaan. They've definitely left the nest.
Okay.
And they're on their way. I can't remember exactly where Sodom and Gomorrah
So
happens.
bore him no children kind of has the context of maybe they're not there yet.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Certainly God hasn't fulfilled that part of the covenant yet.
Because I'm wondering too if that's the equal sign here, if that's
For the equation?
yeah,
That's the
she's
tipping
pregnant,
point?
this must be
Yeah.
the destination type of, and that's literal
Maybe.
thinking. But
Because we'll get to that a little in later weeks, but now we're going to be at a tipping point in the story. So, all right, Genesis chapter 16, starting again at verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "You see that Yahweh has prevented me from bearing children. Go in to my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, so they are in Canaan,
okay.
Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife. He went in to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May Yahweh judge between you and me." So this is very similar language to, if you remember, the curse with Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. This is did you eat of the fruit? The woman whom you gave me the fruit, and I ate of it. And then, is this true, woman? The serpent tricked me. Like there's this really passing the buck kind of thing. Like you're all in the wrong. Nobody's the hero here, and it goes on, verse 6. But Abram said to Sarai, "Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please." Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she ran away from her. The angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahweh, found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She said, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." The angel of Yahweh said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her." The angel of Yahweh also said to her, "I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of Yahweh said to her, and then now this is poetry, not just in prose. Now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his kin. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, "You are Elroy." For she said, "Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him?" Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roy. It lies between Kadesh and Bared. So we're stopping a little short there. But so lots of kind of strange things happening here. I would say that we could take a literary critical view of it and say that I think one of the purposes of this story is to describe events that are so it was probably written well after any of this was purported to happen. So maybe hundreds of years later, to describe the context of Israelites living in the land of Canaan at odds with these other tribes and these other peoples. And then the origin story of that then being oh, well, you know why? It goes back to Abram and Sarai and Hagar, and they had this son, and then this and that. And they were Ishmaelites, and there were people that were at odds with the Hebrew people. So they're describing kind of so there's part of this is trying to answer the historical question of, if we really are the people of God, then how come there's other people who are causing problems for us? Why isn't this easy? If Yahweh's on our side, why isn't this just going easy? And part of that description, part of the answer to that question is, well, and it actually is an important theological point, part of that answer is, well, God's actually for the Ishmaelites in a certain way also. And it's actually rooted not in them, but in us screwing up, in Abram and Sarai screwing up, which is a pretty novel idea for a culture if you really think about it. For example, if the American frontier origin story, if part of the actual origin story of that acknowledged the genocide of natives, which, the original stories don't. It's all about the hero.
I didn't know about that until I was an adult.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a little unusual that a culture has an identity story, because it's a big deal. Father Abraham of the Israelite nation, and to go back and say, no, this isn't about them being savages and terrible people and we have to conquer them. This actually roots back to we screwed up and something was done that was wrong, and that's why, and that is having historic repercussions all the way to today, and this weird thing that God can be on both sides. God can be on our side, but can also be on the side of the other. And particularly because Ishmael ends up being the basis of Muslim religion, and the Islamic nation ties their origin story back to this story of Ishmael being born. And that's how they make it the claim of God's favor and a relationship and a covenant with God through also Abram. Worshiping the same God and a very similar, and the same covenant even, if you go all the way back. And yet, obviously, the predominantly Christian West and the predominantly Muslim, East and Middle East, are still at odds with each other, still having quarrels and fights. So I think that's really interesting that the origin story didn't immediately cast themselves as the hero, that they were humble enough to cast themselves in a it was a much wiser, I think, perspective on things.
I'd love to boil that down. So you'd love this, because this is 10 out of 10 drama, almost 11 out of 10.
Ready? Let's go.
Sarai's old and desperate and is at the age of maturity of, okay, it's probably not happening for me.
You can almost read even though it doesn't explicitly say, you can read her mind going okay, God said children, where are the children?
Yeah.
How much longer do I possibly have to do this?
Yep.
And
it's the whole phrase of trust me, we'll get there. And before you get there, you're waiting, you're contemplating, am I looking for a signal? Am I looking for this? Or are we supposed to just do it and he'll just bless us anyway? The drama here is she does a complete U-turn and comes back and goes, oh, I should have said no before it happened. Now it's almost my fault. And then Abram's caught in the, you told me to.
Well,
right?
Abram's not. I would say they all. I wouldn't cast one as a hero or the other.
No,
You
that's
know?
not what I'm saying.
Right.
Both are at fault here.
Yeah, they're both kind of, and they both. It tears them apart. It tears their relationships apart.
Yeah. They're in the drama.
Yeah.
Go.
You like The Bachelor.
Yeah. This is Bachelor number.
So the basics of the story.
But also, Egyptian slave girl. 100% more attractive. So, and it's not to say it like that. Not attractive in, they are beautiful, but not attractive in the beautiful sense, but of the...
Young. She's
young.
Yeah,
gonna be.
she's gonna be
yes.
fertile.
Young,
She's gonna have children.
untouched,
Yeah.
young, and
Controllable,
and young.
ownable. Like there's something there too. Like
She's
the
also
fact that she
probably-
can order this is
Yeah.
pretty nasty. You
Yeah.
know. Like now, culturally, I when this story was written, they would not balk at the idea of slavery nearly like we would.
Right.
Right.
You know, like, and also there's some evidence even within the Bible that also the nature of Hebrew slavery, like it's not American slavery. American slavery is a particularly heinous and nefarious thing in like modern history, you know, like so there's some evidence that Hebrew slavery actually wasn't as like you could serve your term. It was more indentured servitude and more like slaves had rights still.
It was indentured. It was.
Yeah.
There wasn't one side here, and not to defend it. In Africa, there were people grabbing people and taking them. Maybe mostly, but there's a small, if not ish, percentage of people that were selling tribes members or whatever to America for goods or whatever else they needed to survive in their camp. And some tribesmen looked to it as I'm serving my family here.
Well,
I'll go do this. And it's in
yeah.
a weird, and that's all stories and stuff, and you
Well,
never know for sure. But
I don't want to get distracted with the history of American slavery as
Right.
much as I just wanted to draw attention to that in particular is a loaded emotional word because
Right.
of. I mean, assuming that most people who are listening to this are from the States, like that's particularly charged for us because our history of slavery is particularly nefarious in modern history. This isn't exactly that, and that's important because, so a Hebrew thousands of years ago reading the story early when it was first written probably would not have balked at slavery, but would have balked at a little bit the like, he's marrying the slave? Like, that's, like, there's something messed up about that. There's something weird about that. And so so rooted in fear, God's not coming through quickly enough, and then like kind of making an excuse, well, this is how God will keep his promise, which is, again, it's like a taking of the reins, and this whole covenant is about trust. Remember, the nature is take all your stuff and go over there to something I'll show you.
Yeah, it's still this idea of humans wanting to be in control
Yeah.
and limiting God to what they can see and what they want to believe, because this idea of unknown is scary. And like
limiting God is a good.
that's like
punch.
that's like what I think of it as, you know, like when we decide, oh, God said he's going to show up in this way, so this is how he's going to show up, like we're limiting who he is and what he can do, and we're missing out on the big picture of where he is in the middle of the story anyway.
Fear of loss of control is kind of what it boils down to. Of, well, if he's taking care of it, then he's taking care of it, and I kind of don't have control here, and that's fine, even though I messed up. But
Well, so now it comes into the mess up part too.
Yes.
So like, so the first half of the story is really, I think, about that control factor that we all, I mean, God knows, I struggle with that. Like the idea that, I mean, God, with the quarantine and the pandemic, how much time have I spent sitting waiting,
Yeah.
like trying not to utterly take control of, and like, and also knowing that if I did, I would just be spinning my wheel. Like I can't really accomplish what I'm going to accomplish. Like I can't really do my calling if that's how it's going to go.
It'd be a waste.
And so I'm sitting here just waiting and waiting, and like, now we started this whole thing with talking about Job. That's why the voice of Job and Lamentations and all these other like prophetic texts are really important, because it's not like sit there and shut up. We have a unique ability to sit and wait and complain. Like,
Yeah.
and that's like, that is not only like permitted, but it's actually acknowledged as part of our holy book. The complaining and lamenting and like, where are you and how long is an important, necessary part of the relationship. And like, there is something about God putting people in waiting places to provoke that response as a worship response, which is weird. It's like counterintuitive. But instead of that, Sarai goes, I'll fix it. I know. I've got this. I own this young woman. You go and be like basically a surrogate mother for my husband. But in order to do that, culturally, they really need to get married. There is no surrogacy. There's not like so there's a friend of mine who actually he and his wife they felt called to be surrogates for people. Her. He's just sitting around worrying, you know. She's the one who actually had to, and like they did it, and they like she was inseminated. She carried she wasn't inseminated because it's not her eggs. Like, but she's literally like pregnant with their child.
She's a vehicle. Yeah.
Went through, and so it's a guy in my covenant group, and so like literally we're like texting that whole night, like, and it was like 2 days of her being in labor. It's like like that is a huge thing to do for somebody.
Yeah.
Now, there's certainly some financial rewards for that, but it's a big deal. There's no such thing as that. So this is not surrogacy as much as it is like, you are going to be the mother of Abram's child, and you are going to be like connected to him forever now. And like, that's kind of what happens. And now, so they divert God's intentions. God's plan for them is diverted. Now, every other God in this time, like, cut your head off, you're done, the deal's off, right? I mean, like that's what people would expect from a God. However, this God follows this woman out into the desert, says to her, and it's the angel of the Lord, but there's a weird dynamic going on. Angels are just the voice of God. And so God is talking to Hagar, and he's saying, listen, I need you to go back, and I promise that your son will be taken care of. But then there's also this prophecy about there's going to be like a resentment here now. There's going to be an inherent conflict. And they describe him as an ass of a man, you know, with his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. And they're describing their relationship probably with a tribe of Ishmaelites that they're dealing with when they're writing that story. So there's a little bit of a undercut from the writer, but I don't want us to miss the point of like, because of this, there are repercussions, but God still is like, God is still following through on the covenant he made with Abraham, which is basically your offspring will inherit my relationship, and I will be with them, and just as I'm going to make a nation out of Israel, now I'm going to make a nation out of Ishmael. And like, so there's something about God following through. And then, spoiler alert, later, Sarai gets pregnant. And God establishes a covenant with her in the next chapter, basically saying, you will be the mother of nations. So this God, rather than cutting her head off and being like, deals off, takes care of the slave, still stays true to the covenant with Abram, and then establishes a new covenant with Sarai to help, arguably to help her calm down and be okay and like, he's essentially kind of going like, I got you. You can trust me. This is going according to plan, you know? And like, how often that's something I take for granted because I grew up in a Christian church. You know, I assume, and most people in the West assume, well, yeah, God is a loving God. That's what we're taught. That's what we believe. That's what we're told. Even secular people are taught that and told that, you know. Now, we can argue about, and there's certainly some good philosophical arguments about the presence of evil and a good God and how does that work and all that. We can debate intellectually about that. But, like, we often miss the very, very good news that this is a God who is not only going to stay true to his word, but God is going to make up for you when you can't stay true to yours. Like, that's a boldly, radically different view of God for the people of this time. So, pause. Questions, comments, reflections, concerns?
I have two things. You got anything?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sure I will once you say something.
Okay, so funny thing first or philosophical thing first?
Funny
Funny
thing
thing
first.
Funny thing first. Okay. Automation. This sounds like a weird industrialist view on God. If Hagar runs away, the program of God, if we're thinking in, what's it called?
Because we do live in a simulation.
In a simulation, right. Meaning that God is a computer program, we're all just pawns and dots and zeros. If Hagar runs off, that computer program goes, hey, you've got Abram's thing in you, and we said we'd make nations out of all of you. Come back here, and we'll do this. Instead of maybe Sarah thinking, oh, it's supposed to be me because I'm married to him. It's this funny look on the process is going to continue with or without you.
Yeah.
And that's where the desperation comes from.
One of the key themes in the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
This is going to happen with or without your cooperation.
Correct.
It's better if you cooperate. It's better for you if you cooperate.
So
I promise I have your best interests at heart.
So the funny point of the automation is that it's like watching the cartoon of the boxes being made, and then a cartoon gets in like Roadrunner, and it just is made into a box, and you're like, hey, what a... but the process goes
the
on,
assembly line.
And you're on the conveyor, you get stamped with paid, or you get stamped with whatever.
Yeah, you can be pressed into the box, or you can cooperate with the system and keep your...
Yeah. So the philosophical, more of like the poetry sense, the ass of the man felt like jesty, kind of, because ass of a man is just a funny phrase to say, or wild donkey, or whatever you want to say.
There might be some original language stuff that I'm just not educated enough to understand there.
And what I was going to say is comedy, if it is comedy, is usually rooted in tragedy, which is why it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's a surprise. Mm-hmm. It's that window breaks right now while we're in silence.
What is it? Tragedy plus time equals comedy?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. So looking back on this, if we look at it as this tragedy underlying a child who is to be scorned and hated, not knowing why, and becomes a bully, or becomes someone that strikes first instead of whatever because he's just learned how to grow up that way, becomes an ass of a man compared to other children that have to learn this stuff as well.
Well, and that's pretty much how it's always worked, right?
Yeah.
Like hurt people, you know?
And the poetry and the nice words here is saying, it's literally a euphemism for he's going to be angry, and parentheses, you got to be there with him, or I will be there with him, or you've got to understand this and appreciate what's happening right now instead of taking your hand against him too. Understand where he's coming from.
So I heard this. So there's an inordinate amount of like very successful, high-level people, like Steve Jobs is one of them, and people at that level, that upper echelon, who are just ultra-producing, like mega progressive thinking, inventive, all that kind of. Those people, in that population, there's a disproportionate amount of people who were adopted, which is a little strange. And if you watch Aaron Sorkin's movie about Steve Jobs, there's a moment in a scene about that where...
Did he do the Ashton Kutcher one?
No.
Oh, damn. I was like,
he did
I have to watch that now.
Fassbender one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think he just called it Steve Jobs. What was it?
Jobs was the Ashton Kutcher one.
I can't remember what it's called. But it's the Aaron Sorkin Steve Jobs movie. It's really great.
Moly.
I love Aaron Sorkin.
He's great.
But there's a moment in the first act where his kind of mentor figure kind of presses him about you don't have to prove this to anyone. Like, you don't have something to prove. You're valuable. And he has this moment, and they're talking specifically about his adoption, and Steve Jobs waves it off. And like, there is at least a theory that there's a consistent enough that there's a pattern, human response to the feeling of being rejected by your parents that leads some people disproportionately into like being hyper productive and proving themselves.
I have a point to go off of.
Yeah, go for it.
So the thing that I've been like kind of stewing on.
It's been off.
Yeah, it should still be recording. Let me just double check.
Yeah. I saw it earlier and it was like,
Patreon.
I disabled all of the.
Patreon content. Courtney, say something crazy.
This stays in. I'm not editing. This is part of it. This is part of the whole
something crazy.
show.
Father Abraham.
No,
the
that's not
medicines.
crazy. The Broncos will win the Super Bowl. That's really crazy.
It did stop,
Right?
No, it didn't. It didn't. It's still going.
Oh, good.
It's just big enough that it's making small progress.
Oh. We're back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome
I
back to the
I was about to burn this house down.
I noticed it, and I'm like, I was
Okay.
Before I lose my
Go,
thought.
go.
Yes,
So-
productive people adopted.
Yeah, I got it. So I've been like stewing lately on this idea, especially in the season where like I'm focusing on developing healthier habits and prioritizing my own health and starting to work out and eat better. And one of the things that's really like difficult for me in that is like on the days when I decide I want to like overindulge or like treat myself, like I have a tendency to like beat myself up and get like really mean to myself. And the thing that I have to like constantly remind myself of is progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection. Progress, not perfection. And like, it's such an easy like thing to like it's very buzzy, you know, but what I mean in that is like, we get so caught up in this idea of control and needing to control everything around us. At least for me, when I feel like I can't control, I feel like I have to do everything as perfectly as possible and I have to find the solution and I have to get there, when really what matters, kind of tying it back to last week, is taking those little steps. We're doing the best that we can.
Is that, so for you, is that rooted in how other people see you?
No, in this particular instance, no. It's rooted in the fact that I have goals that I want to achieve, and me like beating up on myself is me feeling like I'm not going to get there. Most of the time, yes, it is relation oriented, but in those moments, it's about me and myself.
Does that relate to anything that's happening in all of society right now, Courtney?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you. Okay. Anyway.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at.
So the word progress now, and you even just said it, is buzzy, whatever word you use,
right.
but very charged now, because progress means no end. Progress means we're going and going and going, and there's no milestone, there's no tick marks, there's no breathe zone, there's no safe zone. We'll use that one too. There's nothing saying we're gonna be okay. Let's sit for a sec, regroup, and we can keep progressing.
Yeah,
or some of us
there
can.
is some crazy philosophy out there about like you can't ever reach an end in progressive things. I think that sounds hopeless and terrible.
I almost think it's like elongated perfectionism.
Yeah.
Or it's really what utopianism is.
The thing is that we're never gonna be perfect.
Right.
You're never gonna be perfect. That's what I was kind of getting at. Is you're never gonna be perfect. You're never gonna choose all the right things. You're never gonna say all the right things. But as long as you're like progressing and doing the best that you can, the best that you can do is the best that you can do.
So
Right.
on a macro scale, so like let me reflect back what I think I heard you say, because I think I identify with it. There's something about I haven't achieved perfection in these areas that I'm trying to work on, and that it's hard to feel okay there. And like sometimes in like negative spaces, it brings up this feeling of like, I'm not good enough. This
Yeah.
is terrible.
Yes.
I'm a bad person.
Right.
And the real answer in that is, instead of going like perfection is necessary to be okay, to instead respond to yourself, like your own inner voice, but with something along the lines of like, I made progress in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not at my goal weight. But I have lost 4 pounds in the past
Right.
couple weeks, and that's like I'm now the trajectory is going in the right direction.
Right. Or like maybe don't even focus on the number of pounds or the weight
Yeah.
that you lost, like it's also looking at it, like using the weight as an example, like, oh, I've been going to bed at the same time consistently every night for the past week. Oh, I've been showing up to the gym.
Like tangible goals that are good for you.
Right.
And celebrating and like being happy with
Because
yourself.
those kinds of things you
Yeah.
can control. You have full control over when you decide to go to the gym and when you decide to go to bed. What you don't have control over is the number of pounds you're losing each
Yeah.
week.
I think
So
that's
instead of coping and like choosing to like force yourself to fix it and being mean to yourself and like whatever, focus on the things that you can take control over and can have power
Now,
of.
I would say that philosophy, that's those two choices, applies also on a macro scale with what we're seeing culturally. And that for the most part, I think, I mean, despite like the quarantine and I'm having a hard time with Trump as my president. Like there's some things that I think we've moved backwards in that we were making progress in, and the quarantine just magnified all of those things to the wildest,
everybody's mental
uncontrollable
health is
thing.
in the shitter right now.
So there's a section of my people, progressive people, who I think go the unhealthy direction, where they go, they're unwilling to look at the progress we are making and have made, and the temptation in that is to then self-destruct.
Sure.
Let's burn it down. Yeah. I'm done with it. Down with the patriarchy. Down with the It's like I'm with you on the down with chauvinism and sexism, and no person should feel accosted in their workplace. Like I'm with you there, but I'm not so sure we should dismantle everything that has made progress that has gotten us to a better place now. I'm more interested in how do we continue the progress. Because we may never get to a perfect, because like you said, nobody's perfect, but I am more interested in but are we moving in the right direction? And if we are, then I'd like to figure out how we can help that continue to go that way, how we can speed it up, how we can, so that's but I would say that applies, that concept applies at multiple different levels, and I use the extreme of your personal level and our national debate level to illustrate that hey, look, this works at both of these levels. It also can go down to your family.
Yeah.
It can go into your social circle or maybe your workplace.
Clean your room.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start with the thing that you have control over and make progress there. And then also celebrate that progress.
Yeah, so that was the other thing I was going to say. Instead of coping that you're not necessarily hitting the things that you want to hit or whatever, celebrate the little wins. It sounds so stupid, but
well,
it's
it can
so
also
important.
Celebrating those things gives us more. So the thing, again, I've talked about protests after George Floyd. I think that had more to do with grief than anything. It was the thing that
Which was well warranted.
It was
oh
well my
warranted.
God, why is this allowed? What is happening? Which is a grief response. The only reason that we can have it now, again, it did go bad in very specific things, but for the most part, it led to this response from the authorities to go no, you're right, we should do something. And arresting the officers or prosecuting, trying to do things about that. The only way that you can have a grief response is if you allow yourself, because grief has this weird thing where you think it can destroy you. People don't want to cry at funerals sometimes because they're afraid that if they start, they'll never stop. Things like that. It's there is a fear and grief but if you can also celebrate, so if tomorrow I step on the scale and I'm a pound heavier, I can be dang it, rather than I'm a piece of shit, right? Because I'm going because when I stepped on and it was lower, I was good for me. That's because I've been doing intermittent fasting and I've been watching calories a little bit more and I've been doing these things, progress. And it's a two-sided coin, you know? Like you have to be able to celebrate and love yourself for the progress
Right.
you're making while also, and then that will allow you to grieve without self-destructing.
And also
you know?
with losing weight, specifically, like, again, looking at the number of the scale, there's a number of different things that control what that number is going to be. Maybe it's water weight. Maybe you're working out more and you're starting to build muscle. Maybe you ate too much or you overate or you didn't get enough sleep or whatever.
Yeah, it's going to go up
and
and
I
down.
think that happens in like grief too. There's so many different like factors to it, and there's like this idea of not wanting to mourn because it's easier to do this when it's like just like stop and let yourself like.
Well, that's time and effort, and time and effort ties into how long am I going to let myself do this, and do I have things to do later, and am I allowed to do this for?
Well, to go back to Ishmael, I don't think it's as much time and effort as it is. So Ishmael, I'm reading into, this is an interpretation for sure. The text doesn't lend this literally, but Ishmael struggled his whole life with his origin. And I imagine never accepted him, like because of how he was made, never made peace with himself, and is then, prophesied to have this life of antagonism. I don't think it's like work and effort that people are afraid of. I think it's the genuine fear, like if you hate yourself, it's really hard to grieve a failure.
Yeah.
If you in your bones feel unloved and unworthy of love, it's going to be really hard to be like, man, I'm really sad that that person turned me down because I am worthy of love and this one didn't work out, and instead we get these other responses which are, because the fear of really feeling that feeling, it feels like self-destruction. Those feelings of rejection or whatever, they feel like self-destruction, and so you fight against them. You fight against yourself, and then you blame it on other people and fight against them, and it turns into this everything except for the one thing that needs to happen, which is to simply sit, maybe work through some of the anger, and get to a place of sadness, and get to a place of like, it's not fair that my dad, who birthed me, then my family rejected me, and that essentially my mother was kind of raped for conception. Like, that's horrible and tragic and not fair and also not my fault and has nothing to do with me and only has to do with their failings, not mine. And like there's something about processing those feelings and getting it that leads to like maturity. I was going to say wholeness, which is true, but also to maturity. That's what like matriarchs and like grandmas who sit quietly in the corner at Thanksgiving and just kind of smile at the bickering, like these wise old sages type of people. That's what they've learned. They've learned that over the years that like, you know what, this doesn't actually have to do with the thing that people say it's about. This has more to do with these things, and I can chuckle at that because I know that we're going to be okay. Like there's something about the process of grief that allows us to get to that kind of maturity, And so there's a lesson, I think, here in, first of all, like not taking matters into your own hands in such a way that you're like you're willing to literally sell out other people to achieve your goals. Like that's what the first half of the story is about. But then there's also this other part with Ishmael about story of origin and self-love and like self-worth and like self-acceptance. Not working through that actually can lead to a whole history of conflict and hatred and like bigotry towards two groups, and like it can have ramifications so far beyond just how you feel about you, because that stuff is contagious and it passes on, and it like kids learn from parents, and that stuff goes from generation to generation. So like the work of genuinely feeling allowing yourself to be sad, lamenting and grieving losses while celebrating victories, and not perfect victories, but like progress, like you said, that can change the world. It's a little bit similar to last week, like just small steps in the right direction have the potential to change the world. And that's absolutely true in your own life, in your own psyche, in your own like heart. Small steps in the right direction, allowing yourself to grieve and allowing yourself to celebrate, can change everyone around you. Like it can pervasively change your community and your family for the better. So, anything else? I feel like we're probably up on time now.
That was great.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
But does she really wanna, but can't stand to see me walk out the door? Can't stand to fight the feeling, 'cause the thought alone is killing me